Okay, I'm going to tell you a story now about a character who I nicknamed Scary Larry, and Scary Larry's girlfriend, Christina. Here's the story, anyway, or Christine. Um, Christine, the girlfriend of this character, lived in an apartment above friends of mine. What it was is it was a house, a two-story house. My friends rented the basement, which was one apartment, and then Scary Larry's girlfriend, Christine, rented the upstairs of the house. Anyway, Christine had two sons from a previous relationship, and they were teenagers. And I ran afoul of Scary Larry. And I'll tell you the story. The two young lads there, Christine's sons, when I was there visiting my friends, these two young lads were out on the hill behind the house. It was in the country, and they were chipping golf balls off the hill into the forest. I saw them doing it, and I happened to have a plastic 5-gallon pail that was about half full of golf balls. And I told them that they could have them, that someday when I thought of it, I'd bring them out when I happened to be coming out that way, and I'd leave them for them. Well, anyway, one day I happened to be going up through there, and I figured I'd stop and see my friends, and I'd bring the golf balls out for the two young lads and leave them for them. Well, Scary Larry was having a garage sale in the driveway. This is Christine's boyfriend. He had a bunch of stuff that he had bought at auctions and whatnot, and he was selling it all. It was on a Saturday. Anyway, there was no sign of my friends. They weren't home. I went around the back of the house, and Christine and Larry were on the back deck out behind the place there, and Christine had told me that my friends had gone away for the weekend. Anyway, I thanked her for telling me that, and I said, I have in my car about half a pail of golf balls that I promised your young lads. I said, can I leave them here with you? She said, no problem. So I brought the pail, and I dumped the golf balls out on the top of the hill where they used to chip them off. I said, I'll just bring them up here and dump them here. I said, I'm going to need my pail back, so I'll just dump them here if that's all right. She said, yeah, that's fine. You go ahead. So I did that. Anyway, she thanked me for bringing the golf balls out for the boys. On my way out, I stopped to look at an old Philco Cathedral set type radio from the 1930s. And the reason I stopped to look at it is, when I was young in the 1980s, I used to have a bit of a side hustle repairing and rebuilding vacuum tube electronics, old radios and televisions and stuff. And I had rebuilt one identical to it. Way back then, it had actually been the first radio that they had ever had at the convent, that the nuns in Perth had at their convent there, And anyway, a friend of mine ended up owning it, and it wasn't working, and so I rebuilt it. And I got it working for him anyway. So I remembered that radio, and when I saw this one there at the sale, it reminded me of that. So I stopped to have a look at it, and I'm looking it over, and of course I'm looking in the back of it, just like a car mechanic wants to look at the engine. I wanted to look at the guts of the radio. And I'm looking at it, and Scary Larry, he comes from around back, and he's just glaring at me. Made me really uncomfortable. I figured he figured I was going to try stealing something from him or whatever, so I just went to my car and left. I wasn't going to do that, but I figured that must be what he thinks. Anyway, next time I see him out there, he's all irate, and he's telling me I better stay away from Christine, that he knows what I'm doing, and all the rest of it. And that it's not normal to come out and say hi and leave golf balls and stuff unless I'm trying to take his woman away from him and all the rest of it. The guy was insane. This guy was a schizophrenic, and he was using a lot of street drugs, and he was a police informant. He was an informant for the OPP, Ontario Provincial Police. He was making drug buys for them with marked bills. And so he had a license to be just as big a criminal as he wanted to be from the police. He could do whatever he wanted. Anyway, he was threatening me that he was going to beat me to death with a golf club. He even took the golf club out of the back of his truck and showed it to me. And he said he was going to, if he could get me alone, he'd beat me to death with it. That he wasn't going to do it then because there were too many witnesses. You know? Anyway, I ended up going to see somebody I knew who was a part of the underworld because I had those connections back in the day. I was on good terms with outlaw bikers and whatnot. And I told that guy the story. And I told him I'm looking to buy a firearm for self-protection. He told me it cost me about $500 to get one. And he didn't have anything on hand. But he said before you do that, he offered me another suggestion for something I could do. And he said if that doesn't work out for you, then you come back and see me and I'll get you what you need. So anyway, that's the story there. What I ended up doing, I didn't do what the outlaw biker suggested, but what I did do is I started following Larry around, and I kept the journal. And then one day, I saw his girlfriend in the driveway when I was going in to see my friends, and I handed her the journal. And I had all his movements, everywhere he had been, where he had been, and all the rest of it written in there. And I handed it to her, and I had also found out his address, his date of birth, his driver's license number, all kinds of stuff, you know. And how I found all that out was he and her had gone away in her car one time when he was there, and he left his truck in the driveway. And when they were away, I got into his truck, and I found all his paperwork. But I didn't let him know how I knew that. I figured sometimes leaving things, but you don't know, leaving a person wondering is best, you know, it messes with their head. So I did all that, and I handed the book to Christine, and I told her, I said, you know, I could have killed him any one of these times. And I didn't, but I could have. So I said, you give this to him and you let him know how close I was, and he didn't even know I was there. Well, after that, he was frightened of me. And I also then was put under surveillance by the OPP, and I was harassed by one particular cop, especially because I think he must have been Larry's handler. Anyway, I was being threatened by Larry continuously. Larry was mentally ill and addicted to drugs, and a real heavy-duty criminal, not somebody to fool around with. I was warned by my friends that they heard him upstairs one morning reading the Bible to Christine, and he told her that he is an angel of death sent to the earth by God to murder and to kill the wicked, and that there was a list of names in the book of Revelation that only he could see. And he started to read off the names, and my name was on the list. So they warned me anyway that this nut thought that he had been ordained by God to kill me. And that's why, at that point, that's when I went to see the outlaw biker. And that's when I started stalking him and keeping a record of everywhere he went. Anyway, I made sure he got that, and that he knew that I knew all kinds of stuff about him, you know. And it freaked him out, is what it did. I had about 2 weeks' worth of notes, because I followed the guy around just like a private investigator would, and took notes. And I had it down there, you know, at flea market, Highway 7 at flea market, sitting on tailgate of truck smoking cigarette, you know, 2 p.m., such and such a date, or whatever. You know, at Canadian Tire gas bar, buying lottery tickets, 7 p.m., such and such a date, and all that. And there were times that I walked within 2 feet of him, and he didn't see me. So, I mean, I'm good at that anyway. If I don't want you to know I'm there, you're not going to know I'm there. Anyway, this is what I did, and I freaked him out. And I made up my mind that if I needed to, I would take him out, that I would actually take his life if it came down to it. Now, to be clear about it, I had no interest in his girlfriend. I wasn't trying to take his girlfriend away from him. And as it stands, I'd be no threat anyway. As I said in the videos I've just posted, women find me repulsive. I'd have no chance at taking a man's girlfriend away from him, even if I wanted to. But anyway, he was paranoid. He had all kinds of weird ideas. There was one time a mutual friend of my friend's went up into Christina's apartment and didn't knock before she went in, and went up and visited Christina. And that guy, he confronted my friend, and he told him, now we're going to have to break up because your friend did that, and now me and Christina are going to have to break up, and it's your fault because you allowed that girl to be around and stuff. He also used to beat Christine. That was the other thing. He used to beat her up. He punched holes in the walls, tore light fixtures out of the ceilings and everything up in that apartment. There was a hole in the siding outside the apartment that he had punched. He smashed the windshield out of her car, and then he smashed the windshield out of his own truck one time when he was in a blind rage, fighting with her. And so that's who I was dealing with anyway. I called him Scary Larry, and I think that was a good name for him. But it ended up, he was scared of me though after I gave her that journal. And I don't know if it got back to him that I'd been making inquiries about a gun or not, but it may have. Anyway, at that time, I wasn't above taking some. I wouldn't hesitate. Even now, if I was faced with that situation, I don't think I'd hesitate. If I was faced with that situation, I really don't, because you're dealing with people who are completely insane. Now, in his case, he was insane, and also drug addicted. In her case, she just seemed to like the drama. She seemed addicted to the drama of the whole thing. But anyway, he was pretty frightened of me anyway, and that worked in my favor because I didn't have any more trouble with him after that. But there was one time I stopped to see some other friends who lived just down the street. And they were a stone's throw away, really, from this house where Christine lived and where my friends lived on the bottom floor. And Larry and Christine were fighting in the driveway. And anyway, when I was getting out of my car in these other people's driveway, and Christine starts pointing over at me, and she says, "Hey, there's Tom. There's Tom. Do you want him to come over here, Larry? Do you want him to come over here?" And Larry was just like, no, not Tom, no. It was crazy. Well, I went into the place, and I stood in the kitchen window with these other two people, and I watched the two of them fighting in the driveway. At one point, Christine took the golf club out of the back of the truck, the one that Larry was threatening to beat me to death with. And she went after Larry, and he managed to get it away from her, and he beat her with it, and he knocked her to the ground, and then he was kicking her. And every time he kicked her, you could see her body would come up about a foot off the ground. He was kicking her so hard. Well, it turned out she ended up with serious internal injuries and had to go to the hospital. And when she was there, she told the doctor who had done it. And so the doctor raised hell and forced the OPP to arrest Larry. Well, that night, and I heard this from my friends, the OPP came out there, and they basically busted Christine's door down, and they went up into her apartment, and they beat the hell out of her, and they told her that if she were to testify against Larry at trial, that they'd come back and kill her. It was 2 OPP officers that threatened her and beat her up. Then they took Larry for a bail hearing. The first judge they took him to said that he was too dangerous to be released, and therefore didn't grant bail. So the police took Larry to another judge who let him out. So normally you get 1 kick at the can for a bail hearing. If the first judge doesn't release you, you're in jail then, and that's it, at least until your trial. Anyway, Christine disappeared just before the trial, and she didn't come back until after it was over. And so Larry got acquitted, of course, and that was it. But yeah, that's the sort of thing that goes on around my hometown anyway. with the police and with police informants and all kinds of different criminals and stuff, that this is the type of stuff that happens around there. There's a lot of corruption. Anyway, I found myself in the middle of all that simply because I gave a pail of golf balls to a couple of teenagers to chip off the hill behind the house.